Hello, everyone. Today is April 2nd. My name is Savita Raghunathan. I'm going to be your host for the Konveyor community call today. We abide by Konveyor code of conduct, which means please be nice to one another. This meeting will be recorded and available on YouTube for future. If you want to check out the discussion items and everything, you can see it on the community playlist, and I'll also add the recording link to the agenda. I've dropped the agenda link in the chat. Feel free to add yourself to the agenda. And I am gonna jump into the topics. I don't see anyone new. Please pause me if I haven't paying attention. I'm gonna start with the demos. The first one is from Ian.
Yes, I'll go ahead and share my screen. Oh, got a new laptop, so need to set all the permissions.
Okay. Is it okay if I move on to the next one and then come back to you?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. The next up is David, Migration Intelligence. Do I see David there? Oh, I don't see David here yet.
I think I might just need to restart Chrome and try again.
Okay. All right, while I wait for folks to, Ian is back. You're muted though. Okay, while I wait for Ian, I'm going to move on to the roadmap. Dylan? Okay, Dylan said he's going to be right back. So
David just crashed somebody else's community call that he's in now.
All right. David, are you ready? Like, I'm going to switch back to demos now if you are ready.
Yeah, sure.
Of course.
That was
yes. Okay.
That was a very awkward experience. I was like, someone please join this call that I recognize. And it was like 4 minutes of like, oh, this is weird. Okay. All right. I gotta like center myself or something. All right, I think I can do this. You ready? Can we do the right tab? Of course, it's going to be like right in the middle of the slideshow, but that's okay. I'll go back to the beginning. All right. So originally, my plan was to build off of the demo that that Ian will share. But the idea here is we've been doing a lot of work on the IDE side to investigate pluggable agent backend architecture, and the idea there from the editor extension, we talked about it at the last community meeting, was moving away from our LangChain based one that we maintain to a community based one like Goose CLI or OpenCode. And what that enables us to do is to experiment and branch out into other migration things. So there are several enhancements in flight currently that are of interest to us, and I don't think I put it in here, but there's the analyzer LSP MCP, and there is the pluggable agent backend. And that kind of drives into what I think is a good path for us to pursue in this next release. And I'm calling it Migration Intelligence because that's the name that Bug came up with when I was like doing that whole conversation. So we've had a lot of conversations and about the hub experience from a platform perspective, and I wanted to start the conversation with a visual of like what I imagine the ideal scenario to be in the future for us. And so right now we have applications get added to the application portfolio in the hub. There's already some automatic analysis that happens on those applications when they're brought in, and they are given archetypes and they are profiled automatically. Now, some of the beyond step 3 is future vision of what the ideal would be. It would be really a good thing for us to be able to leverage agentic tools like Block or Goose or OpenCode to go off and generate a migration plan, like an implementation of I'm migrating from this to this, or this is the profile of this thing it needs to conform to. Go make an implementation plan to fix or remedy all of those things. And it would come back with a review. Maybe it has some questions for you to answer. Maybe there's some iteration in this planning. That's all in the future. But you review, eventually you approve a plan, and then a particular application, you would have a phased implementation approach where you say, phase 0 being the stuff that must be executed before we do any work. Okay, go off and do that and submit it as a PR. Maybe in the hub, we have some UX around reviewing that work and accepting it, but it gets accepted. And then you can iterate on that as far as you would like to go before dropping into something like dev spaces to finish what remains of that particular migration. So this slide is really just to frame the conversation around that ideal. So right now, what the agent sees when we ask for a solution and the agent mode is enabled, we basically tell the LLM, hey, you're a migration assistant. You're migrating. This is the name of the profile that you're using. This is the language you're looking at. These are the incidents. There's no context, no code-based understanding, no institutional knowledge baked into that. An agent can fix individual, but it can't actually plan a migration. So what I said in step 4, the problem is the agentic planning is where we break down. We want to produce a good migration plan, but the agent needs to understand more about that particular migration. So what actually is happening, patterns this code base uses, organizational preferences, those kinds of things need to be collected and maintained when we perform these fixes so that they're done correctly. So what I believe is an important step is essentially, in my mind, is like a pre-plan. When we have analysis results, and say we have like a bucket of applications that meet certain criteria, we want to have a skill that when we go to create that phased implementation plan, we can bring that context into that request and get back a phased implementation plans. So like examine the analysis results, explore the code base or multiple code bases, ask for feedback, and you create from that a migration skill that is particular to this group of applications that you want to migrate. And this skill then becomes a reusable piece of knowledge that you can bring around with you and use throughout the process. So what is a migration skill in this case is really just a markdown file. If you hang out on the AI LLM bro Twitter, you've probably seen markdown files and sharing of skills, and so you know what these look like. But they're markdown files, and they can reference tools and things like that. The agent creates a skill. So the idea here is that we create an MCP server. This is just a proof of concept at this stage, but the MCP server has some migration intelligence. It can get the migration context, it can get existing skills, and it can save the skill into the directory. And so this is where I'm supposed to do a demo. And what I want to do before I switch screens is Oh, Google is eating my. There we go. All right. Unfortunately, I need to do some pre-work before I show you. And then I want to make sure, are you all able to see my screen? We have the analysis panel. I can run an analysis. The cool thing, and this is related to the Goose integration work that we've done, is now we have like an experimental chat mode. In an experimental chat, there's actually a bar where I can send prompts to the LLM like you would in Claude or Codex or those kinds of things. The idea here, though, is not to try and replace a Claude or a Codex. The idea primarily is for us to have a test bed for us to generate, have a place where we can test and refine skills and MCPs to deliver on that higher level vision. So I have analysis results now. I can like make a prompt, like I'd like you to analyze this migration and create a migration skill for it. And this is kind of curated specifically to try and make the LLM do what I want it to. There's a few bugs in the permissions requester where it looks like it wants to modify, but it actually wants to read. So it's going to step through the different tools to do some of the analysis of the overall context. And it's going to come back with some questions. So the POM XML suggests Quarkus 3x, which uses Jakarta. Should I prioritize migrating all? And we say, yes. I'm actually not very good at all these things, but I send that goes, this should go back to, if the demo is going to go well, it's going to go to back to Goose, and it should create a migration skill from that. And now what I have in here is a cool store Java EE to Quarkus migration skill. Now, this is kind of a toy example, but it illustrates the point in my mind of what we want to be. See if I can find my tab again. What we want to be driving towards as a like conveyor team. So I showed you the demo. So the skills are the things that we can do to close the loop. We can have skills that that we bring along as context as we perform migrations. And the advantage here is not that we make giant leaps in performance as far as the IDE perspective is concerned. It's now these things can be brought to the CLI, or they can be brought into containers in the hub. And the hub can spawn those containers with the appropriate tool use included and get the same result that we would get in the IDE if we were looking at it one-on-one. And once you're able to execute these things like in a container, you can do those things at scale across many apps, right? So what I'm trying to drive at here is to decouple from the extension. Up till now, all of our migration intelligence to use and leverage LLMs to perform a migration, that intelligence has lived in the extension. And what we're driving at with this idea, this proof of concept, is to move away from that, pull the intelligence out of the extension and make it usable elsewhere. So the unlock here would be me calling Goose directly with these MCPs and say, hey, give me a migration skill. Same tools anywhere in the landscape. So Jonah has the PR 259 in the enhancements repo. We have the PR for the pluggable agent backend. And on top of those enhancements, we can look at this conveyor planner, migration planner, migration intelligence. And I think that is all I have. Any questions?
Yeah, sorry if this is a stupid question, but I guess I'm curious. Like in this demo, you had the LLM generate a skill from scratch. Is that true?
Yes.
And so I guess where I'm interested now, which I briefly spoke to you about this, but I think this is cool, larger context for the rest of the team. We could theoretically, I'm thinking from a context of like the centralized config work. If, for example, I'm imagining there was some standardized things that's defined for this specific profile, right? Like we call it analysis profile, but I guess you could refactor that a little bit to be like a migrator profile. And that migrator profile contains analysis information, and it could theoretically contain stuff we inject into the skill, right? Like, so we essentially have like a template that the skill can be generated off of in some context based on the output. I love that idea. I think that's super cool. That was a really cool demo. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so what I would imagine would be the next step in this flow would be to take this particular skill and use it to create a phased implementation plan. And that phased implementation plan goes in the same directory. And you can imagine when we talk about the centralized config, what you get when you know that blip at the beginning where I say drop into dev spaces, imagine that as the migrator context where it's synced to the hub. It gets a centralized config profile. So it's going to get the analyzer profiles that it's supposed to use, and it's going to get these skills that become the context that live with, you try and fix a particular issue. These skills live with that. So that context is available and for the full life cycle of the migration.
Really cool. Really cool. Thank you.
Go for it. You got it.
Yeah. I see skill is something that is published or like created by either us as a rule, like think of it as a rule set. So it will either be created by an architect or us, and it will only have instructions on how to execute a migration. What you had in the skill, to me, it looks more like a plan. That's like specific to that migration. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, and I think this kind of drives it. I think this is a toy example.
Yeah.
But I imagine a scenario where you have a collection of applications that meet a particular archetype, and you make this kind of request against all of those repos, right? You spawn a process and give LLM access to all of the repos in that bucket, and you generate a plan for, like, not a particular implementation plan for migrating each of them, but a generic, these are the preferences that we have for patterns and these are, all of these applications break these specific rules in each of them, and categorically, what do we need to know about them in order to actually make phased implementation plans for each of them. So yeah, I viewed this as like a plan, like a pre-planning.
Okay, yeah, makes sense.
But yeah, in this particular example, I don't think in an IDE context you would do this pre-planning. I think you would just what you would prefer to have is just get back a phased implementation plan.
Mhm.
But
And do you plan on like when you say phased implementation plan, like do you envision that as like broken up into separate contexts, meaning you could work on phase 1 and then start from scratch, work on phase 2, and again start from scratch, work on the next phase?
when you say start from,
Basically,
use-
new context, like
yeah, okay.
start.
So the fixes for that phase have been completed, but
Yes.
yes, that is the way I would imagine a phased implementation. But the context that would come with it, right, would be the generic plan and the specific plan.
Yep. Makes sense. All right. Thanks.
Thanks, David. So if this presentation is available, like if it's not in your workspace, can you share it with the Konveyor community or like just drop it in the agenda? Perfect. Thanks, David. I am going to switch back to Ian's presentation. Yes, that's really cool demo. And there is a note from Dylan as well on the chat. I'm going to switch back to Ian. Ian, whenever you're ready.
Okay. Cool. All right, so I'm just going to show some of the UX changes around the what we have now piece that David explained in terms of just the agent in the human in the loop flow end to end with our new agent pluggable agent drop-in. So this is the UI. I was tasked with making sure everything that we have currently working continues to work. So this is the current experience now as we all know it, still working. We have Git solution going through our existing agent architecture with everything still working. And we have this new chat view to the right that leverages VS Code's secondary sidebar, which is kind of nice that you can see everything in the chat while also viewing anything in your editor. So I won't focus too much time on this part. This all works as it does today. The new exciting pieces are now, even in this old flow, we can manage our provider settings in the UI itself rather than managing a YAML config file. So that works. And so to enable or engage our Goose agent, we can hit this flag here, move this out of the analysis view into this sidebar so we can enable our agent mode and hit apply and restart. This will now be using Goose for any Git solution requests. And Goose also opens up quite a bit of permission settings. I think David mentioned a little bit about that. We are able to fine-tune the granular permissions for any tool calls or web access requests, MCP tools, file editing, or command execution requests. That's all configurable here. There's a sensible default so that the only thing that is surfaced to the user is the actual file editing piece. So that I will kick off a request here. So now we're hitting Goose directly. And this is our Goose agent that has access to any MCP servers that we may define within our extension. David set up a really cool MCP server bridge that allows us to have modular MCP servers that contain business logic around analysis. So that could be triggered from this Goose agent as well. The Goose agent has its own developer MCP server that does these file changes, and we can respond to those tool requests. They're in line in the chat. Also, I think David was showing you guys the experimental chat version of this experience, and that does open up the free flow chat to chat directly with LLM through Goose messaging, or Goose just passes through the message to the LLM pretty much. So, I think that is pretty much everything I have to demo today. So, yep. Thanks.
Any questions? Thank you, Ian. This looks really sleek.
Well, thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, I have no questions. It just looks way better.
Really cool. I want to add to the it's interesting. I guess I'm just thinking, like, it's cool that you guys demo these two things together. We're really setting ourselves up to start integrating these things outside of the IDE, right? I mean, you basically, this is imagine a more composable way of actually running the agentic workflow than we had before, which was all the LangChain built stuff, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, this is really cool. Good
Yeah,
stuff.
I mean, even abstracting the settings out of like pure VS Code stuff into our own things would make it theoretically easier to share back and forth. With, like,
I totally
Hub
agree.
UI and stuff, right, Ian? Like, is there the potential that we could actually take some of this out to like sort of shared packaging?
I think so. Yeah, 100% should be. Easy
Yeah,
to
I
do.
mean, that would be a big win if we could be prototyping in the IDE, but then also like getting it back up to the UI without having to rebuild it all.
Yeah, you know, I think we've been struggling to figure out how this stuff starts to bake back into the UI and the hub. These two demos, I think, is giving us a really good concrete story as to like where to go next with this stuff. So great stuff. Yeah, thanks for sharing. It was cool.
Thank you, David and Ian. I'm gonna put a note. I felt like I should have gone with Ian's first and David's next to have the continuity, but I'm just gonna put a note in the agenda later. Okay, so
Sveta, I have a request too. Can we
Sure.
skip the roadmap for a second and
Okay.
the upcoming sprint? Can we go over enhancements and triage and then come back?
yes,
Just because I have stuff on the roadmap that I think won't make any sense until we go over that section. So that way, Jeff, David, Jonah can cover kind of what they've got there. And
perfect. Let me just share my screen quickly. All right. So we're gonna go with the upcoming sprint and then the enhancements triage, right? Or the other way around? Am I audible?
Yeah, I think it was the enhancement triage and then the upcoming sprint.
Okay. All right.
oh
so
yeah, so, sorry, I was on mute. Yes, please. The enhancements first, then we'll come back. Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks.
Perfect. Yes. We have the first one from Jeff. It's about Hub OIDC provider. Jeff, can you provide some more
Sure.
insight?
Yeah, so I've discussed this with a few people, so it won't be new to some folks, but I wanted it's still in a draft state, but I wanted to at least introduce the topic. The goal of the enhancement, in a nutshell, is to get rid of Keycloak. The primary or the basics of the implementation is that we will that the hub will become an OIDC provider itself, and that it will, in the inventory, manage typical RBAC things like users and roles and permissions. and the UI will switch from Keycloak specific implementations to using generic OIDC libraries, and so it will be talking OIDC to the hub. The UI will also include just a couple of pages to manage things like users, roles, and permissions. The permissions are primarily, like, I think we can let users construct new roles, but the permission set will be fixed. And then we will go ahead and seed with the existing roles and permissions and so forth. But users can, can create new roles, and then they can, assign and unassign. You basically manage permissions mapped to the roles. That is kind of the gist of it. The heavy lifting for the implementation gets delegated to a Go library that looks really good to do like the OIDC handshakes and stuff. So we're not having to implement like all that much there. We would implement both general OpenID authentication flows, as well as I can't remember the name of it. Basically, there's a grant type that allows you to, it's specifically geared towards machine-to-machine stuff that I can kind of flesh out or explain more later. But effectively, if you have the client ID and the client secret, then you can get a token, and you don't have to be actually mapped to a user. So it's really designed for like API integration. The other part of this is that, and one of the things that we get out of Keycloak is that Keycloak gives you a way to delegate either authentication or authorization or both to an external OIDC provider. The library that I'm looking at facilitates the same thing, where basically if you were to configure, say, some other OIDC provider, let's just say you deploy this in an existing environment that has Keycloak, you can configure in the hub an external provider, and what it will do is it will authenticate. It will delegate authentication. It will act like an OIDC broker, and it would delegate that to that Keycloak. In which case, it can either do it for authentication, and then the hub can layer on basically inject the scopes for the RBAC stuff, or it could get from the other Keycloak the whole thing and expect users to manage both authentication and the authorization parts in terms of like roles and scope assignment there. The last part of this is something that I just kind of learned from talking to Ramon yesterday that seems to be really important, and from what it looks like, relatively trivial, and that is that along with an external OIDC provider, I think we're going to want to do integration with an external LDAP. And I know all this sounds like a lot of stuff, but actually the moving parts in the hub for this are relatively minor. And so the only thing we would need to do there is be able to define this external LDAP server or Active Directory. And then from it, we would do the authentication of the user, and then we would get the groups that user is a member of, and then map those to roles that we have assigned in Tackle. And so, and then from there, as part of that, the OIDC flow, basically, it just uses that as the authority for authentication, use that as the authority of how to map to our existing roles. But then we would still do the permissions/scope lookups that we have for our roles. I think the mapping logic there looks relatively straightforward. Anyway, so that's kind of the gist of it. The idea is out of the box, users can enable authentication without installing Keycloak. The goal is to long-term, just users have to really never use Keycloak for anything ever again, and that they get a good experience through the UI. Like when I add a new user, I can just go through through our UI. If we want to adjust what roles and things they have, that will be done through a nice UI page. And then, if users want to change passwords, like all this stuff, it just gets handled there. That's the gist of it. I've got a bit of the detail in the enhancement now. I'm still leaving it in draft, not because I think all the ideas are kind of captured in there for that, but I still need to talk to Fabian about something that he brought up in terms of like API keys and at least satisfying that requirement. And then kind of looking at all the descriptive text I have in the enhancement, I feel like I probably am. I usually just write those things and I take for granted all the stuff that's in my head and it's not there. And so part of what I want to do is go back in there and probably add a lot more detail in places that will address questions that I'm sure people will have when they read it. So that's kind of the gist of it.
So there are one enhancement is not currently written, but there's two together. To summarize them both, and I kind of alluded to them in the presentation or the demo, is right now when you click Get Solution, we send a prompt to the LLM with violations and file contents, and the the agent can't really explore the code base, can't iterate, can't use tools, and it doesn't really have a migration context beyond the profile name. And so the idea that we're pursuing is to bring in tools like OpenCode and Goose so that we can have this pluggable agent framework. We don't actually have to make a full bet on Goose or OpenCode winning in the long run. We can just have the necessary abstractions so that we can leverage them and bring in some other tool in the future if that's better. But enabling the tool use, enabling that communication back and forth where it can say, ask us questions and we can answer them. And it can produce those multi-file solutions. And all of this is towards the goal of moving migration intelligence out of the extension specifically into things like skills, MCPs, prompts, whatever, that we can take into CLI executions and container-based executions in the future. That's really all there is.
Thank you, Jeff and David. I didn't realize I was muted. Next up is Jonah, proposal for adding MCP command to the analyzer.
Yeah, so this was an effort that I ran through about in January, and so to be honest, I haven't actually looked at it in quite a while. But at a high level, it was just a proposal to add an MCP server to the Analyzer LSP so that AI tools can query our analysis directly. At a high level, we've got I think 6 core tools like analyze, run, rules list, rules validate, dependencies get, providers list, analyze incidents, so that agents can take advantage of it. There's definitely some discussion and love that needs to be given to it. I think the last comment was on February, so if people want to take a look at it and just see about the implementation of it, be my guest. So there's definitely some discussions on where should it live? Should it live in Analyzer LSP or Cantra, or statefulness and testability and stuff like that. So if you want to go ahead and take a look at it, be my guest.
Thank you, Jonah. And we have 3 enhancements, updates, or triage from Scott.
Hey. Yeah, so the 3 that I got, along the lines of what Jeff was talking about, to use OIDC library in the UI. It's pretty straightforward and includes some refactoring around the code to make its use consistent, because there's multiple techniques being used and that needs to be one. So that will streamline that work, and it can be done kind of independently of Jeff's work because the current Keycloak implementation would support it, and that helps out the UI quite a bit. Lets us drop some old libraries that aren't maintained anymore, that kind of thing. The next 2 are kind of related. The next one is adopting Patternfly 6 and current UI standards, kind of one of the later projects to migrate that way. It's pretty straightforward. well, I guess not exactly pretty straightforward because there's a lot of work to do for that because there's deprecated use of things. And once the libraries do get moved over, a lot of the end-to-end testing will need to be updated also to handle the different layouts and CSS class uses, etc. So that's a non-trivial change. I know that Sean has done some stuff to try to automate some of that work. I'm not sure how that impacts the enhancement exactly, but I will post the actual enhancement doc pretty soon for that one. Let's just look to the issue to umbrella it. The last one is for UXD redesigns and improvements. We've been working with some of the UXD group to try to modernize some of the flows, add a dashboard instead of dropping people right onto the application inventory, and kind of have a way to have some of the complex flows guided through the thing, like how to set up a analysis profile when you just drop onto the application. Like there's multiple steps across multiple entities to do that. So having a guided tour or a quick start to handle that would be quite useful. That's kind of a work in progress. Don't know exactly when that work will be ready to start working on, but it would come after PF6 because all of the UXD designers that we work with are all PF6 level things. So lots of facelifts planned and coming. So that's it.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Scott. Oh, I lost my window. Just bear with me for 1 minute. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, thank you, Scott. If you all have any questions or any thoughts, any comments about all these awesome enhancements that have been listed here. Oh, I see Fabian has a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask. I think we talked about this on another meeting earlier this week. But Dylan, if I'm correct, the ideal process for these enhancements is that everybody at least gives them a read through, even if it's not necessarily directly applicable to them, just in case they spot something that could kind of affect their area of interest. So ideally, everyone in this call would go and at least give all these enhancements a skim, right?
Yeah. Well, I'll talk about that.
Okay.
And when we get to the roadmap for 010, because yeah, I totally agree with you. I think we're not getting enough eyes on these things. So, but let's first agree what's going to 010 so that everyone knows what we have to get and when the when reviews are due. So we'll talk about that in a minute. Yeah.
Right. And if you have any thoughts, any comments, any ideas, can just drop them in the enhancements repo and someone triage it. Okay, so next up, I'm going to move on to the open discussions. I know Juanma's not here. I didn't realize I moved this topic from the previous meeting, and it's a public holiday in Spain. So I'm going to move Juanma's topic to the next meeting. And in the meanwhile, the next one is from Rick. App migration using Crane, heads up with current focus sharing. So if Marek, whenever you're ready.
Yes, I am. You can keep this screen sharing. There is nothing big. So, hey, I would like just to give some short give up and share what we are focusing on. So a few months, or I think 1 or 2 months back, we started work on the application migration, which means migrate Kubernetes workloads. We were thinking about some kubectl migrate thing. Finally, we decided to continue on a Crane tool, which already existed. We are just continue on them. Currently, you can find it on github.com/mic2/Crane. Our current focus is to update export action for resources which are also like cluster level. Then we are working on update transform part with customize. That should allow like greater customization or greater flexibility of the tool itself. And also we work on adding comprehensive test suite also from previous projects which were targeted to do the same thing. we are working on it actively. So hopefully in one of next meetings, we can share our progress. Yeah, that's all from me.
Thank you, Marek. Any questions? All right. I am going to move back to the sprint, and I want to move to the roadmap, but Dylan's going to be. Oh, Dylan's back.
Oh,
So
sorry, just got back. Sorry,
no
someone
worries.
came to my door and I sent them away. Okay, yeah, thanks. Can I let me just share my screen. I think that will help.
Sounds good. I'll stop presenting.
So I think this might take a minute because I actually want to like make sure we all agree upon the 010 stuff, but let's just get the easy parts out of the way. So just a reminder, 092 is due dates technically today, but I talked to the people involved. So these tickets need to be closed out by tomorrow. I'm going to cut 092 by tomorrow. If there's any concerns or problems with that, please just reach out to me so I can make sure that I don't accidentally close out your tickets, because I will update the GitHub action to go and realign all these stuff. So once I cut the release. So any concerns about 092? Good. That's then there's 093. Just a reminder, this GA date is set for the 24th. So I'm just cutting these streams at the end of each sprint. Some UI stuff that we triaged last week, I think, and then something around C# provider that needs to get it fixed. So then the Go dependency provider stuff too. Yeah. So nothing crazy here, but just please make sure you help me keep this up to date. And I can cut this sooner if all these tickets are closed, but I'll plan on cutting this on the end of next sprint unless there's any something comes up. Questions on 093? Yes, sweet.
I don't have questions on exactly these thoughts, but I just want to say that we are doing awesome work shipping so many things. I think we need to make sure that we are posting it as announcements and mailing lists. We could figure out automation to do all those things, but I think it'll be neat if we could just, put it out so that the world can know.
Totally agree.
I can work with you, Dylan, on that.
Yeah,
and it's not super urgent, but that'll be so nice because so many new things are going in, and it'll be really cool to get more eyes.
Yeah, I mean, maybe a simple thing to do if we add a Slack webhook to the release pipeline with like just publishing the change log as a message in the Konveyor Slack. I think that could be really cool.
I just think we need to get some tokens or something, the Cube community, because it's on Cube Slack, it's not our Slack. The easiest thing might be to send in the mailing list because that's something that we control and we might have more access to it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, makes sense.
Okay.
Okay, maybe that's an action item. Takeaway, we need to broadcast these releases. So yeah, I'll work with you to figure that out. Okay. Anything on 09? So this is, I hope this turns into more of an open discussion. I just filled this stuff out, but this is not the normal process, right? So the normal process is we have a call for enhancements, which we had an open call for enhancements for 010 for a very long time. And we're supposed to be setting like some type of freeze date. And essentially that freeze date is when we agree anything that's been approved and merged is open to be included in the next minor release. We have a few enhancements that have been open for a while that aren't moving. And like an example of that is the MCP one, this migration complexity one. So I just assumed that like there's been enough time of people reviewing these that it makes sense to include them in 010. And I also was like selfishly trying to think through just our larger roadmap, what needs to be done in 010 to like keep driving the puck forward. Sorry, it's two sports analogies mixed. So this is my just kind of brain dump. I would like to make sure that we all agree on what we're shooting for. And then I want to set the enhancement freeze date for the end of the sprint. So before I even get into the sprint goals, like to me, this would be the top priority is making sure we do design and review of all of these things that we're intending to include. To Fabian's point earlier, this needs to be a task that we all own. Yeah, exactly, David. Yeah. We all need to own this part. I think I've felt a little, well, there's been feedback really from the whole community. Like, we miss test cases because we don't have everyone reviewing the enhancements. We generally just poke people of like where they may feel like they're interested, and we only get 2 reviews upon it, which is the bare minimum to include on these enhancements. There's some stuff we're going to be looking at, like for example, this agent-driven migration work. The scope for this can be small, but it's going to be included in the whole project. Like moving forward, I don't think it makes sense to only have people that are on the IDE side looking at this stuff. I think this is going to impact the whole team. May not impact the whole team in 010, but it's definitely impact the whole team by 011, right? So before I get into all these, like, I really want to make it clear, I'm expecting everyone, well, the ask is that everyone on this community call is looking at these enhancements and providing some feedback. So with that said, I think there's a lot of external interest on a MCP server that exposes Konveyor functionality. And that functionality, I think, is really highly motivated to come from analysis, driving of the analyzer, but potentially could include other stuff. So the enhancement that Jonah has, I think this makes a ton of sense to get into 010. That MCP subcommand, we could then bundle it and deploy it somewhere if we really found that interesting. But bare minimum, getting some type of MCP server that exposes the analysis capabilities would be interesting to explore. Savitha's done some work around rules authoring with an MCP server. I don't know if, Savitha, you want to talk about that for a second, just kind of what you've explored there and what might be interesting to potentially also include here.
Oh, sure, yes. So for now, I have been experimenting with some of the migration guides and change logs and whatnot. So you start to extract patterns, like LLMs can extract patterns and then use MCP to generate the rules. And I will go take a look at Jonah's enhancement because he mentioned about the rules validation. So if it's already existing in his enhancements, maybe it would make sense to just integrate rules generation too, so we could use the rules validation there. That's what I have done. And I've also experimented a little bit with CLI and a skill. I need a little bit more time to like I'm still investigating. Personally, I prefer the CLI and skill, but that's my opinion. I will present it in an enhancement soon. I think like we have room for both. So the things can be integrated into MCP server, and then like we could also have it as a skill. So that also provides, integrates nicely into the future vision that we have, like agent-driven migrations. That's all I have.
Cool, thank you. So I guess just like a gut feel, are we all on board with including some type of MCP server in 010 that exposes at bare minimum the analysis capabilities, potentially other things, depending on what Savitha finds is interesting to include? And if this is not there, then I think I'd break this out separately, like something around AI generated rules authoring, right? AI assisted rules authoring, I suppose. Maybe MCP, maybe skill, don't know, don't care, just this would be something else. Okay, all thumbs up. So I'm gonna leave this on here. Again, this would mean that this enhancement has to be approved and merged by the 24th, or else it's not going into 010. Okay, then next, obviously, this is why I wanted to have the enhancement discussion first. Like this is, there's a few pieces to this, right? And I don't know, I'm sorry, I meant to pull up. Is this the same enhancement 271? These are different. Okay, cool. So let me link this so I don't forget. And we probably need, well, I guess let me ask Jeff, is this enhancement include the operator dependency removal, or is this just the hub changes?
It's just the hub changes for now. But I could be talked into it, including both. I mean,
okay,
it probably should.
The operator dependency removal.
And there's probably other things that the enhancement doesn't cover very thoroughly, which is anything in the operator needed seating, additional seating and that kind of thing.
Okay. I guess like the point here being is this. I think this is the right parent tracking thing for this that I would call it, internal authorization refactor. Anything that's around key cloak removal and what that entails,
Sure.
just fall under here. I'm gonna just give a quick like some stuff that maybe why this has an impact across the whole project. So one, from a OLM perspective, like OLM is actually removing dependencies. So the way that we ship Konveyor today, by the end of the year, we can't actually do it. So like this is solving that problem, which is we're not going to longer depend upon Keycloak within our dependencies list. The second is, and I apologize if you guys already said this, but the work with the agent integration, there's some issues around a long-standing authorization token for the agents to be running and interacting with the hub and the gateway. So we're going to tackle that as a subset of this work, which is just making sure we have a solution for that. Not really like related to the key cloak removal, but just something that's going to fall under this umbrella as well. And then third, this opens up the door to obviously handle authorization in a completely different manner than we've done in the past, which is really cool. So I think this is like a must-have for O10, if I'm being honest with you. Any thumbs up, thumbs down? Great. So I'm going to include this. Again, I need help. This is something that impacts basically every part of the project. So I would expect everyone to provide some feedback here, please. Okay. I'm going to come back to this for a second because I think this is going to be the thing I'd like to have a lot of discussion upon if we have some time. Migration complexity. So Todd opened this enhancement a while ago. Hasn't gotten a ton of feedback. Actually, I'm sorry. Let's talk about Powderfly first, because I think this is related to the agent stuff. So let's talk about this. I think this is a no-brainer. Work's already started. I guess there's more than one issue for this, right? So this one. I think this is a simple ACK, but you guys feel differently. Like, we need to move to Powderfly 6, and Scott is already leading the charge on this front. So I'm all for including this O10. Disagreements, discussion. Okay, again, please. Are we intending to submit an actual enhancement for this, Scott, around the specific UI UX changes that have to occur?
I did. Yeah, they're in progress. They're in flight.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So please, everyone, take a look at this for provide feedback. Okay, let's talk about these two. So agent-driven migrations. I'll be honest with you. I don't really know exactly how far we take this. Like, obviously, the demos that Ian and David gave earlier, I think are a really interesting avenue to pursue this, all in the context of the IDE. I think there is appetite for integrating this functionality in a bunch of different ways across the project, whether or not that's from Contra and the CLI experience, from the UI. Like, really, I think the end goal of this is that we actually integrate this fully into the archetype centralized config workflow somehow, some way that the UI exposes. I'm trying to figure out how we can not boil the ocean to make sure that we get the actual meat and potatoes of this thing correct. So, the discussion that David and Pranav were having earlier around the actual skill and like what that artifact looks like, that's interesting to perform the migration. I think we're all unsure what that looks like right now, and that's totally okay and good. I think you can build a lot of the piping around this while you experiment with that part and figure out what makes sense. I think what I'm interested in the most is agreeing upon an experience that the IDE can use and an experience that we could drive from a CLI while we go and design the UI UX for this thing in parallel. And I would want to commit to the scope for O10 that we drive this experience from the CLI and the IDE. And and have like a long shot goal of implementing this into the UI, because I'm just concerned that we're not gonna. I don't want to build a UI UX around something that we're changing rapidly, if that makes sense. So I'd like to iterate, make sure we all are getting value out of the experience of the feature from like a CLI based perspective before we go and build out the entire UI UX experience for this thing. But what I would like to see is some type of integration into the centralized config workflow, because I think that's really where this gets kind of interesting. How we differentiate ourselves from just like using Claude is putting some type of control over how the migrator is actually driving the agent before that thing gets started. I don't know what this looks like. I'm really honestly, I think this would be one of the most important features that we get the entire team taking a look at. The reason why migration complexity for rules ties into this, I think, and maybe it doesn't, like maybe we decide this is not the path we want to take, is some of the ideas that were coming out of this was like, if you take centralized config experience and you kind of extrapolate a little bit, perhaps there's a workflow where the architect is essentially defining what threshold of the agentic experience where it stops and where the manual human experience takes over, right? So maybe the architect is saying, hey, I'm going to classify all these rules and these analysis targets as trivial. So I know that I'm comfortable letting the agent go and do that automatically, but I really have the expectation that this migrator on my team does the rest of the work, right? So I kind of thought maybe this would fit into this because, this was kind of one of the key goals that Todd had for this, was figuring out where the agent could go and automate the migration versus like when we think these tasks are a little bit too complex for the agent. So I guess I'm just looking for thoughts, feedback on this. Like, is this? I don't know if anyone's had a chance to read this yet. There's something about this that I think fits into the agent workflow, but I don't know if it's the same thing. Yeah, David.
I was going to say, I actually think they fit pretty well. I know when I first heard about migration complexity, I wondered about the AI's ability to do confidence intervals and actually act on them meaningfully. But I do think having general buckets of saying this is an expert level versus this is trivial would probably make it easier for us to craft phased implementation plans that were weighted to push the easy trivial stuff to the beginning. Like,
yeah,
that's how I see that working.
I agree with you. I also think like it's kind of no different than how, like, if we imagine that some user has written a bunch of custom rules, and they have now this extra knob to control, like some type of classification for the rules that they're basically bubbling back up to the Gen AI stuff. It's kind of no different than if you go put Claude into plan mode and you're kind of saying like, I want you to do these things, but don't touch these things, right? I mean, it's kind of the same thing. I just look at this as an extra piece of detail within the rule set to then bubble up to that migration plan strategy that we were talking about earlier. With that said, I haven't looked at this myself. I think we would need to go review this and decide if this just ends up becoming a subset of this, or if we want to take the ideas that Todd had started here and really just finish this enhancement. I don't know. But I guess I'm just going to say this is maybe a subset of this thing, because the only reason we're really doing this is for the agent-driven migration work.
Well, that would go also into the conveyor MCP, right? Like the MCP would need to expose that complexity.
Right. Well, this would just end up becoming additional output data from the analysis, right? Like,
Right.
hey,
that the conveyor MCP that Jonah's working on would need to know about and give back to an LLM that asks for it.
Yes. Sorry, I thought that this would just become basically details and output YAML, which I thought the MCP essentially is just a programmatic way of getting output YAML, right?
Jenna might know the answer to that better.
I'm gonna be honest. It's been a while since I read it, wrote it because I wrote it a couple months ago. But the idea was that at a first pass, the MCP server was just going to expose the analysis results to like agents that requested it. There was no intelligence yet. It was just like, I request this, get this back, et cetera, et cetera.
I think that's perfect.
No, I think the concern in my mind is if we add a migration complexity to the rules, there might be work required in the Konveyor MCP to make sure that those things make it when the LLM is asking for analysis results, that we actually include the complexity that was put on the rule that fired. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. But isn't that inherent? Because what we're essentially saying that like this becomes part of the violation in the output YAML, right?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking along the lines of Dylan.
If it comes for free, it comes for free. That's cool.
Yeah.
The only thing I didn't love about this is I kind of don't understand what makes this different from effort. I mean, it's like, why even have effort? I guess like. Effort is supposed to be like this story point mapping context, and I know this fundamentally solves something different. I guess then I would question what value does effort truly provide because of like the generic story point mapping stuff. But okay, yeah, Pranav, it's a fair point, I guess. Like we're talking about human effort, human story points versus LLM story points. Sorry, just kidding. Okay. Okay, and then the last thing I think I really want to figure out here is like, what is in scope for this? I think that like if I go, I don't know how far you are along with this enhancement, and we have the whole sprint to figure this out. So I'm not saying we have to solve this right today. What can we realistically go as far as? How far can we go with this within the 0-10 timeframe? If we were able to include UI changes to support this, I'm all for it. And I actually would prefer that we even start this work to keep driving it forward. I do not want to get into the realm of like we're building a UI experience for something that we haven't fully baked, and it essentially becomes meaningless and useless because we've changed things so fast, right? But I do think we know enough about the problem domain that we can start wireframe designing for it, because I think like we know where we want to plug this into the general workflow. And we can kind of black box the actual thing that does the work underneath it. But I just don't want to like go build the whole thing until we like, hey, we're getting a ton of value out of this experience with these migration targets, right? Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
I was wondering if it would be a reasonable minimum to make it so that like Konveyor skills thing was included in the centralized config that we get from the hub. Like if that could be included as an artifact that would be pulled down with centralized config turned on for a particular app.
It would. Then how do you actually add it to the profile?
Well, that would be the UI change.
Okay.
Like instead of, because I feel like launching a container with Goose and our MCP and getting all of that to work and generating a plan is probably too much for 0.10. But if you were able to make a migration skill and include that with the analysis profile via the UI, and then when an actual migrator person enables centralized config in the IDE, they just get it for free and it's used. I think that would be a good story that moves us forward without wasted effort.
You know, it kind of suggests a higher level thing to me. So Analysis profiles are just canned profiles, and users can use those for things that have nothing to do with the AI flow, right? It could just be, it's simply a way to run the analysis better. I don't know exactly what this would be, but it sounds to me like this would be something higher level that would contain or reference an analysis profile plus a set of skills. And I don't know what to call it or what that is, but it suggests to me that it's maybe a new thing and not just something we stick in the profile.
I think it could be a new thing, I guess the point would be this would be an extension to the centralized configuration workflow, right? It doesn't necessarily need to be the same entity, but the idea that the workflow where the architect is essentially defining these things for the migrator, and the migrator can sync them down from the hub. Like, I think that's
Totally
the
agree.
part. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just maybe, I wouldn't say splitting hairs, but I'm just suggesting that before we decide to add that as part of the profile, I think what we're maybe saying more broadly, and you just articulated this, is that this is something that would be included in maybe the bundle, maybe it's like whatever is being downloaded. Totally agree with all that.
Okay. Because then the other thing, David, that I guess I think I said this yesterday. I don't care what this ends up being. I have no idea. I don't even want to sound like stupid assuming things here, but when we say like passing a skill around, like a skill inherently has some type of set of tools associated with it, right? Like, I don't know what makes sense to be passing around and downloading from like the hub. Like, is there some expectation that some of these tools exist on the machine? Are these scripts? Are they binaries? Like, I'd imagine a common tool that the skill uses is the analyzer, right? And maybe there's just some expectation you already have this on your machine. I don't know. It's all stuff that I think I would need to see more details about.
I think for an initial pass, the like migration skill we would make would not have tools baked into it, and we probably wouldn't support custom tools like to be automatically downloaded. I would think that we would have to constrain ourselves, because I wonder, because it's still an open question to me. Like, if we have skills as a thing that we're adding to the bundle that we get when you enable centralized config, is the UI experience around making that part possible doable in the 0.10 timeframe?
Yeah, I think it depends how far we take it, right? Because I imagine normally how you'd want to do this is you'd want to basically generate this plan skill thing, right? And then integrate some type of review process for it or something. I don't know. I mean, spitballing.
Well, I would think for the first pass, you would just have to upload the artifact. Like,
Okay.
the architect would make it maybe individually via LLM prompts, and they would upload that skill to the hub, and it would just be assigned to, what is that, archetypes that eventually get included when you get the bundle from the hub.
That is a cool idea. Like, then we're basically taking out the complexity of having to define this wizard on how you go and build this thing, and that could be like phase 2, right?
Right. Yeah, we're just making it possible and not throw away.
Okay, here's my takeaway then from the conversation is I think we need the team to chime in. First of all of this belongs either here or as an additional enhancement to this, because I know like the thing that drove this initially was to refactor the agent inside of the IDE. And then this started to kind of expose some other ideas that I think is interesting that David showed off today. So let's put way more of the discussion on this enhancement, and let's come up with like a phased approach that we know we can commit to for 0.10. what is like the bare minimum to get this in the UI, and let's try to iron this out like ASAP. I think to me this is the part that is the big feature I want to include in 010. I just don't want to like have this giant scope creep where we kind of get halfway through it and we're like, oh crap, we need all this stuff to exist in the UI for this to really function appropriately. So I think we need to put a lot of forethought into it, into how we can build the experience CLI centric while exposing some minimum capabilities in the UI to make this whole thing work, and then kind of set like a next phase goal for what we would actually want in the UI once we've proven out the actual thing, right? I don't know. That's like so hand wavy. I think that's just my general idea.
I needed to write the enhancement for the thing that I demoed, that migration intelligence. I think what I'll do is just try and make that enhancement cover what I demoed and a discussion of the potential tackle UI impact in the hub bundle artifacts and get feedback that way.
Cool. That sounds good. I'm going to reiterate this point. I did a lot of talking here. I am making all of this up right now. I think this is where I need a lot of the team's input. And we were talking about this earlier as a team. Like, I think to do this right is the skill part is where all the actual work happens. I think that is almost one of the minor parts of getting this thing right as a starting point, because I think you can change that and swap that out. It's fairly trivially. Like, at the end of the day, the agents are kind of becoming a commodity. The actual work that happens under that hood, we can tweak that, change that, improve it as we move forward. It's really about getting the platform engineering approach right, of like, how would we enable this for this architect and migrator strategy to actually function appropriately. And then we'll work on getting the actual like technical details of that right. So I don't know. I'm really kind of talking, making this up, but questions, thoughts? Does the vision make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, the vision makes a ton of sense. I think we've been taking the approach of just kind of doing a lot of prototyping and then seeing what looks interesting and works and bringing that to the enhancement proposals. And I think we'll probably just keep doing that for like the next week or so and get the proposals as accurate as we can.
Cool. Sorry, and then I was just thinking, I wrote this down when you guys were talking. There's another thing that you mentioned that I'm calling batch remediation. I don't know if this is the right word for it, but this is the idea that once we get all the story right, that I can actually just take 50 applications, click a button in the UI, and go get 50 PRs that does all the automated agent work. That, I think I'm going to just say that's out of scope right now. Like, I don't think that's really we don't need to get that part right yet, because I think we need to focus on making sure that we get one migration working at a time. We get that experience working from a CLI. There's nothing stopping someone from scripting that out or running it in a Tecton pipeline and getting this thing on the batch scale side of things. This to me is a big UI UX lift that we need to kind of take into consideration as we go build this stuff, but it doesn't need to get included in 010. That's my opinion. Okay. Any concerns that we just set the enhancement freeze date by the end of the sprint? So again, like, that's my top goal for this sprint, is making sure we get everything that we're saying we're including in 010 approved and merged by the end of the sprint. Thumbs down, thumbs up, all good with that?
Yeah, I think we should just hammer that people need to do the reviews, and especially in that last week, that comments need to get resolved, and we need to start merging them in the last week of the sprint. Like, I don't want to have it be like Thursday and Friday, everyone is trying to get everything in all at the same time.
Totally agree.
Because I don't read that fast.
I'm asking kind of like, this should be a daily task. It's like we're kind of iterating upon these enhancements every single day. Yeah. And then feature freeze, this is open for debate. I'm just trying to set something generally in sight. Like, I think, to me, this is the part that I think, depending on the scope of this, I don't know if this date makes sense or if it can be earlier, it can be later. I don't really know. I think June 5th is a reasonable time frame because we don't need to wait till the 24th to start this work. Thoughts? Okay with this as a tentative date? We can discuss next community call. All right, I'm just going to assume yes. And then GA, I don't know. I'll figure that out. We don't need to agree on this stuff right now. I'm just going to cover the high level goals of the sprint based on everything we just said. 010 feature design review, 093 work, and then there's this ongoing UI effort to migrate to Python Play 6. And then here's all the details for each group. We're already at like an hour and a half. If you guys want to, we can focus on any of these things. Anything to add that's important to highlight, or we're all good for next sprint? Yeah, I agree, Fabian. Okay, I had one open discussion thing. No one volunteered to take this community meeting. So let's get a volunteer who's going to host this community meeting that's not myself or Sabitha. Next one. Who wants to do it? Come on. It's going to be fun. I know one of you guys is itching to do it. We're going to rotate this. That's what we agreed upon. So I'm going to sit here in silence till someone volunteers.
I can do it.
Attaboy. Thanks, Fabian. Nice. That's all I had. I'll turn it back over to you, Sabitha.
Thank you all. I also wanted to take this moment to say thanks, kudos. I don't think this is my favorite part we haven't been doing, or like, I don't know. We all have thanks, kudos, shout outs to say, but I just want to say it out publicly. I just want to thank the entire team and the Konveyor community. I feel like we are doing like cutting edge stuff, and it's nice. We are sharing knowledge sharing and learning in public, and I think we are embracing the full spirit of open source. When I look outside, when I talk to others and see, and I really like how we are, even though the majority of the contributors come from one company, but we are following open source principles, and I just want to say it's awesome. And that was not related to anything in the sprint or things, technical stuff, anything, but I just felt like.
Thanks, Vita. Yeah, great work,
right.
everyone. Keep up the good work.
So that's all for today's meeting. And if you all have any questions, any thoughts, any comments, any ideas, anything, you can reach out to us in the mailing list or in the Slack channel, or create an issue in one of our repos. And we'll see you all in 3 weeks.
Thanks, everyone.
And a new host. All right then. Bye, everyone.